This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether mom's into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried and true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now you can save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with up to 50% off site-wide during Movement's Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
Welcome back to the X-Cast. As ever, the truth is in here. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and thank you very much for joining me for this episode of our special Fight the Future Minute podcast series. You are listening to our coverage of minute 59 of the film, which begins at the 58-minute mark as Mulder and Scully are still driving in search of the tanker trucks, and when this minute ends, night has fallen, and they still haven't found what they're looking for. To misquote a U2 song. And to discuss this minute, I'm joined by Caredwen Foley. Hey, Caredwen.
Hello, how are you?
Really good, thanks, yeah. Really good. This is an interesting one, and it kind of follows on from what we were talking about last time. I think at the start of this minute, or close to the start, Mulder says, 5 years together, Scully. When have I been wrong? Never. Not driving, anyway. And yeah, you were saying in the last episode, like, this is a familiar, we're used to seeing them drive in. I was trying to think of some interesting examples of Mulder and Scully driving, and I guess the first one that springs to mind is Syzygy, where they're kind of at odds for that episode, aren't they?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, I was thinking about Dreamland, the beginning of Dreamland, the scene where they're talking about, where Scully is talking about people kind of going about their normal lives and how they're stuck in the car. But yeah, there are examples of this dating all the way back through the series. This one, I think, aesthetically is so close to what we see in season 6, like just in terms of the setting, and how the actors are styled and things like that. But I think there's a lot of resonance between some of those examples.
And we've got Drive coming up very shortly after the film, of course, as well, which is all about perpetual motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like to discuss about this one? You said off air that you thought there was some interesting stuff here.
Well, I think it's, to follow on a little bit from something that we touched on briefly in the last minute, it's striking to me how much time clearly elapses in the context of this minute. It's very hard to imagine what the conversation in the car might have been between the time Mulder's crowing about never being wrong and the time they get out of the car. Clearly, like, quite some time later. I mean, even giving it the benefit of the doubt, I'm looking at just the images from that scene right now, and it's just starting to get kind of pinkish in the sky at the time they plow through that intersection. The last shot we see before the crossfade into the darkness is like, the sun hasn't gone down yet, but it looks like it's going down pretty soon. It's fully dark. Yeah. By the time we meet them next, like, there are stars out. So, I don't know. I just think that must have been a very, very tense couple hours. It's hard not to imagine a little buyer's remorse, maybe, from that course of action.
Yeah, well, of course, it's the next minute, isn't it? But when they do stop, I think Scully is quite agitated. So, yeah, I think it makes total sense. Apparently, so, yeah, the transition to night. So it's quite a nice transition because kind of an X forms with the road. In one shot, it's running one way across the screen, and then you go to the nighttime shot and it's going the other way. And what I've read is that Rob Bowman was quite an assiduous storyboarder, planning everything out to the nth degree where he could. So it's really interesting, actually, that there are also lots of stories about things that they get to set, they get to the location, and they just have to kind of throw out the plan. You know, so it's kind of interesting that he seems to be very, I don't know, it must be, I suppose being prepared is always the best thing. Maybe that's easier then to kind of go off and do something else. But, for example, it's this minute, isn't it, where Mulder's crouched down. No, he's not crouched down, sorry. When they stop and Mulder's looking at the map.
Yeah, it is. They've just gotten to the fence posts with the barbed wire, and Mulder's pulling up the map, and he's trying to kind of... Scully is clearly very upset, and he's trying to talk her down a little bit.
That's it. So, apparently the original idea for shooting that scene was that Mulder would be crouched down using the car headlight to illuminate the map. And then when they got there, they just decided not to do that. But that had kind of an unanticipated ramification, because what that meant was that you could always see Sorgus, the location in the background. So there's actually some trickery here where they've kind of painted out all the city lights. They painted out the freeway.
Wow, they did a tremendous job. You'd never know.
Yeah. And I don't know, that's about all I've picked up. Oh, just that this whole sequence was meant to be more elaborate, going into the next minutes as well, you know, jumping onto a train, etc. And they just kind of simplified it. But yeah, did you pick up anything else about this one?
Couple small things. One, I had never made a point of looking at the sign on the fence before, but it reads, some have tried, some have died, turn back, and then the beginning of what looks like it says no trespassing, which, if anything, given these two's history, seems like it would be a great sign that they're on the right track.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, this has a very, like, edge of Area 51 feel to it, to kind of go back to the Dreamland resonances. And, you know, I feel like once you've been in the car for an hour or two waiting for some sign that maybe you've come the right way, I mean, this feels like a sign. What else is going to be on the other side of that fence?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, that goes all the way back to like episodes like Deep Throat, doesn't it? Where they have the same kind of thing. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that should be validating.
I didn't notice that sign, I'll confess. Did you say you had a couple of things? Was there one more? Or?
That was what I had for those. I think just the one was the signs, and the other was the fact that it hits them in a different way than I would have expected. It's more discouraging, especially to Scully, than I would have anticipated given their previous experiences.
The reason there isn't much production detail on this, from me anyway, is that the commentary, they seem to take this scene as a bit of a chance to talk about some other things. So, on the 99 commentary, which is just Carter and Rob Bowman, he talks about how he snuck away for 10 days at the beginning of the year to write 2/3 of the movie, to kind of show it to Fox and to kind of get things going. So he snuck away for 10 days while there was all sorts of stuff going on in the TV show that needed, you know, other people to do and so on. So I thought that was interesting. He says that the film was a short prep and it was costly and he wouldn't ever do it that way again. So, I mean, it's come up again and again on these podcasts, but it's just kind of crazy when you think about it that there was so much going on and just the sheer logistical challenge of doing something like this in the midst of, like, you know, a network TV production schedule. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's astonishing to me that they pulled this off between seasons 4 and 5. I mean, that just, given how intensive the production schedules for the show during the regular seasons were, and the fact that the show had already set such a high bar in terms of production value with previous kind of blockbuster mythology episodes, that they knew they were going to have to do something really big and pull out all the stops. And I think they accomplished that with Fight the Future. It really does have a very grand scale, even though, you know, I know a lot of diehard viewers were sort of like hoping for more revelation in a, you know, kind of mythology conspiracy sense. But I mean, you can't deny that it reifies how global the conspiracy has been established to be at this point. And it does it in a really, you know, appropriately cinematic way. So they sure got a lot of bang for their buck, but yeah, I can't imagine how grueling it must have been.
Yeah, I think so. And also the fact, I mean, we talked in the last minute about minor kind of plot, I don't know, contrivances or leaps, but it's incredibly coherent, I think, considering all that as well. So yeah. All right, let me just run you through some of these facts about cars that we began last time.
Carl, I'm going to be so disappointed if for the next minute you don't have facts about tanker trucks.
That, you know what, that's the one thing I didn't get. But trains, we can look for.
Damn it, sweetie.
Sorry. Right, what do you make of this? South African residents can legally attach small flamethrowers to the side of their cars to provide defence against carjackers. I mean, I have to ask if that's proportionate, but what do you think?
I'm speechless. Is it effective also? I mean, proportionate is one thing, but
yeah,
flamethrowers. What's the how do they... I have so many questions that I'm not going to be able to get answers to them.
I have got at least one friend from South Africa, so I'm going to have to look into this further, I think.
So do I. I'll have to find out.
Okay. And I've got more than one friend from Canada. Where? Right. Residents of Churchill, Canada, leave their cars unlocked to offer an escape for pedestrians who might encounter polar bears on Main Street. So, I mean, there's a nice sense of community there, I think.
Sounds plausible. If I remember correctly, I think Churchill is predominantly has sort of a tourist economy around people coming to see polar bears and things. So very, very, very far north. And I think until pretty recently, there was train service that ran there seasonally that I think might have been suspended a couple years ago, finally. That it just wasn't practical to maintain. But I think that they might still have some tourism via, small planes and things like that. But yeah, it's awfully kind to say, hey, we know you came here to see the polar bears. We don't want you to get eaten by them, though.
Yeah. So I should say that all of these facts are from a website called kickassfacts.com. I mean, I don't know how reliable a site with that name is, but anyway, just for the record. Two more. Okay. This one I'm not sure I believe. I'm not sure I buy it. So let me see what you think. So... You can instantly cool down a car that has been sitting under the sun by rolling down the window on one side and opening and closing the door on the other side 5 to 6 times. I mean, how would that... I don't know. What do you think? Instantly?
Instantly seems like a bit of a stretch. I mean, it does, you're creating an area of low pressure, and just barometrically it makes sense you'd be... Yeah, you're making a cross draft in your car. That's not instantly.
Okay. Right, the last one is good here, I think. So, the Soviet Union allowed theatres to play The Grapes of Wrath. So I'm guessing this is the Henry Fonda film, The Grapes of Wrath, from 1940-ish, I think. Because of it, they allowed theatres to play The Grapes of Wrath because of its depiction of the plight of the poor under capitalism. But it was later withdrawn because Russian audiences were amazed that even the poorest Americans could afford a car. Now, I thought this was interesting, just the idea of cultural differences, because I listened to a podcast. I haven't listened to it for a long time. I don't know if it's still going, but it was called Invisibilia. It was about the invisible forces that shape our lives, things like fear. And there was one about, it touched on when McDonald's opened in Russia. And apparently there was just a big kind of cultural difference, because the idea that a restaurant, a staff in a restaurant would smile at a customer was just kind of alien in Russia, because the idea was kind of the reverse, that the customer should try to impress the people who work in the restaurant. So I just thought it was fascinating, that kind of thing. Yeah,
that is interesting. It's striking, those kind of quality of life differences. I was just thinking about Craig Mazin's spectacular Chernobyl miniseries from last year. He spoke about how when they were striving for accuracy while they were filming that, there's a scene at the very beginning where Valery Legasov feeds his cat, and he says we had to rid ourselves of the idea that he would be feeding the cat food, because nobody fed their cats cat food. In the USSR at that time. Mm-hmm. He was feeding him table scraps because that's what you had. You gave your pet your leftovers. And so I think those kind of attempts to make sure that the kind of cultural circumstances or biases or whatever of the producers of different works of art don't kind of compromise with the actual experiences of the people being depicted there, and or kind of throw them over in favor of the experiences of the intended viewers. This is kind of another little piece of reflection of that.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Man, we've got way far off the beaten track here, haven't we?
Much like our heroes.
Much like, indeed, yeah, fitting phrase. All right, so I guess we're just about done for this minute. So, next up is minute 60. And Caredwen, you'll be back for me as that scene continues, so I'm really looking forward to that. In the meantime, listeners, find us in all the usual places. You know the score by now. So until our next minute, remember, as always, trust no one.
Previously on the We Made This Network. By projection light.
Dickinson also brings the audience's attention to a then unknown Audrey, who shines like a bright, pure beacon the whole film. It's quite amazing to think that only a year after this film, she would be cast in the film that would catapult her to superstardom and garner her an Oscar win. But it's also not difficult to believe. Her performance is so unaffected, as if she's living the part of Nora, which, as I've said, she almost had already. And it's also wonderful to see her dance, particularly during the audition scene towards the start of the film, where she flits and spins like an angel. It made me think of how she had danced during the war for audiences who were not allowed to clap due to the prohibition of public gatherings, but how she brought joy to those people as she brings joy to everyone who's watching this film every time she dances.
Don't say the C word.
Sex, drugs and rock and roll isn't a cliche. I've seen it all. There's a unique group of groupies that feel the need to collect, if that's the right term to use, like all of the band members, as in to sleep with all the band members and all of the crew.
Oh, wow. So they kind of, do they work their way from the top down, or do they work their way from the bottom up?
Yeah, get to whoever they can first. And it would always be me and one of the band members they'd never get. And I was quite proud of that. I was like, yeah, I'm the one that you don't know about. So like, you can never brag. I'm not a bragging right.
That's pretty admirable. And is there a particular reason why you're not going to shag the groupies?
At the time, I was a virgin and I didn't want my first time to be with just some random lady on the road.
Bloody hell, that really is admirable. I think I'd have thrown my virginity at anybody, to be honest with you.
It got to the point a few years on, like, I was like, I'm thinking about it now. But no.
The time is now, a Millennium podcast.
The way that he's offered that job, I think he's done that before. It's not out of character for him to go into situations like that. I know it's done with a bit more levity earlier in the season in Goodbye Charlie, where he goes to speak to the social worker and he lays off all of his problems, which is a great scene in that episode.
Yeah, it's very hard to have that sort of levity when you're dealing with literal Nazis, to be fair.
Well, yeah, it's a slightly different take on the same kind of.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether the Mel Brooks sequence of that would probably be something to behold.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.